Earlier this month, a significant and unusual breach of national security became public. Jeffrey Goldberg, editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, was mistakenly added to a high-level Signal group chat that included 14 high-ranking officials, including Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and National Security Advisor Michael Waltz. Over several days, Goldberg silently observed the group exchanging details about US airstrikes on Houthi targets in Yemen. No one noticed. No one removed him, no one has yet been held accountable, and so far the US government has offered no explanation. This absence of a clear account has left the public and likely investigators grasping for answers. While theories have circulated, one in particular merits serious consideration, not because it is sensational, but because it is simple, plausible, and internally coherent, that the breach occurred due to a misinterpretation of an alias, one likely tied directly to President Trump. The key may lie in the name J. Goldberg. J. Goldberg was Donald Trump's longtime personal attorney, a trusted figure during high-stakes legal moments in Trump's earlier career. He passed away in 2022. Given Trump's well-documented history of using aliases, John Barron and John Miller among them, it would not be surprising if he continued that practice in private digital communications. An alias like J. Goldberg would carry familiarity and plausible deniability while avoiding explicit identification in unarchived or encrypted platforms like Signal. If this was the name used by Trump as an alias in internal discussions, the implications are profound but structurally logical. And more importantly, it explains how this breach could have happened by accident. Just a single point of ambiguity at a critical moment. The Signal group was created by National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, who was almost certainly acting under direct instruction from the president, or at least with his expectations in mind. If Trump told Waltz to add J. Goldberg to the group, the instruction may have been delivered verbally. And therein lies the crucial ambiguity. Spoken aloud, the name J and initial J are indistinguishable. A well-meaning staffer, or even Waltz himself, hearing add J. Goldberg, could easily interpret it as the initial J and turn to Signal's contact suggestions. If Jeffrey Goldberg, a public figure with extensive government contacts, was saved as J. Goldberg in a device's address book, he may have been selected in error. That alone would be enough to explain his inclusion in the chat. And once added, the presence of a participant named Jeffrey Goldberg might not immediately raise alarms, especially if participants assumed it was the president using an alias and chose not to question the silence. This hypothesis not only accounts for the breach itself, but also explains why no one acted to correct it. They didn't think anything was wrong. This theory is not meant to assign blame prematurely, but to offer investigators a credible path toward explanation. It is grounded in known behavioral patterns, structural authority, and technical realities of communication platforms like Signal. Even if this was not the specific cause of the breach, its plausibility highlights a more general concern: the vulnerability created when informal alias usage meets verbal ambiguity and unvetted assumptions in digital communication. It also raises broader procedural questions. Is there an established process for verifying identities before adding participants to high-level communications? Are pseudonymous handles being used in official discussions? And perhaps most urgently, how many other Signal groups are operating without secure identity controls? Congress and relevant oversight bodies have a responsibility to find out, not just to understand how this happened, but to ensure it cannot happen again. This was not a leak in the traditional sense. It was something more modern and more fragile, a silent breach caused not by defection but by ambiguity. If J. Goldberg was an alias meant to obscure identity, and that alias was misunderstood, then the system broke at the intersection of language, habit, and technology. The public deserves clarity. National security demands it, and those tasked with protecting our communications must now answer one simple question. Who did they think was in the room?